In this video, we have a tropical disturbance heading into the Gulf of Mexico, along with the summertime cold front, and the monsoonal flow continues, as well as the intense storms finally take a break. Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here with another update. This is your Sunday, July 26th update. Let's take a look at the overall satellite picture this morning and tell you what's really happening out there. You can actually see this little mesoscale convective system coming off the Florida panhandle here out into portions of Louisiana this morning with a lot of shower activity. That's actually going to be slowly drifting into the open waters of the Gulf. But man, look at the standout here with this summertime cold front. That's going to be a welcome relief with all the heat that you've been dealing with further south. You still got one more day down here for a good chunk of Texas and Oklahoma with that intense heat. But there's the welcome change with that summertime cold front on the way, and the monsoonal flow continues as the heat really starts to intensify, although brief, up here into the Pacific Northwest. So let's take a look at the overall setup on the monsoon, because that has came in with a vengeance over the last 2 weeks. I mean, as soon as the calendar flipped to about June 15th, I mean, the floodgates really opened. It was bone dry for months. And much of New Mexico and much of out here in far west Texas, you can actually see on the graph here, this is upwards to almost 600% above average rainfall, which you typically see this time of year. So it's almost been a relentless flow, steady stream. Some areas have actually seen measurable rainfall 11 out of the last 12 days. And this monsoonal flow will just continue into the days to come. So it's definitely been a huge change out there into parts of the desert Southwest. But today, it's all about the cold front and the record heat. So we still have about 10 record high temperatures expecting for much of Texas and down in parts of the deep south, but especially out here into the Pacific Northwest, where it's been a huge surge in temperatures today. 99 degrees for Portland, Oregon, guys. That's a huge change of what you've seen late. Seattle's getting well into the 90s right off the coast here. Even triple digits may not be on the table, as the very dry conditions rapidly, but they were in the 50s this morning, and they're going to be rapidly surging 40, 50 degrees this afternoon and topping out into the upper 90s. But yeah, widespread hundreds and a good chunk of California here into the desert Southwest. But there is the brief respite cool front. Man, it's really nice out behind this cold front with widespread 70s actually for a good chunk of the country, and still holding on to the 80s, if not 90s, up here in portions of the Northeast. But the big change is just the intense storms are finally gonna be taking a break. I mean, the map here, I mean, we've been dealing with at least a slight risk or better ever since April 26th. Every single day for the last 2 months, we've had at least a slight risk for severe storms somewhere in the U.S. We don't have that today. the streak is finally ended. We just have a kind of a marginal risk for storms along this kind of boundary. So we should be looking at some showers and thunderstorms, although subtle, about 20 to 30% along this boundary and portions of Oklahoma and Texas. But some of these could be on the marginal side, some higher wind gusts to possibly 60 miles an hour, and portions of Memphis, getting into Nashville, possibly into Bowling Green, up here in portions of Cincinnati, getting into Columbus and possibly Pittsburgh, later on this afternoon. But there's that cold front. Right now, it's northwest of, say, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The monsoonal flow, the heavier rain, the flash flooding rains continue for a good chunk of New Mexico and southern Colorado. That's where they've been impacting on really just kind of a daily basis. But along this cold front, again, there's about a 20% chance, 30% chance of some isolated activity along this cold front as it oozes further southeast later on this afternoon, and right along this boundary as well. Some of those could be on the marginal severe side, and we'll be watching that disturbance that's going to be heading out into the Gulf of Mexico. But there's the setup by the time we get into Monday, and you can definitely see where the cold front is, right? It follows all the rain and the instability. again, nothing to be concerned about on the severe side, but still some of these storms could be fairly strong as we get into the peak heating of the afternoon along that boundary, along the cold front. So we could be looking at some shower activity and the portions of getting into portions of Mississippi, Alabama, into Georgia, heading into the Carolinas. And right along the coast here, following that boundary, monsoonal flow continues. And of course, on the backside, we got rapid clearing in the backside and crystal clear skies. There's your temperatures on Monday with finally the break in the heat for much of the South. It's hard pressed to even find it a triple digit temperatures because it's not there. Finally, you're going to be taking a break from the heat that you've been dealing with for a good chunk of the country. Even the Pacific Northwest, it kind of tops out. So it's only about a 2-day warm up, big time warm up for them, and then they will start to come down as we head into get deeper into next week. So yeah, it's a big change in temperatures, but there's that disturbance that's going to be heading out into the open waters of the Gulf. It's got that 20% chance of a probability there's going to be light steering currents with this system. So we're going to be watching this right as it gets out of the open waters, and a lot of times these systems can be pretty big time copious rain producers. It's going to be hard pressed to form into a tropical storm, I would think, because we're just going to be so close to proximity of land. But regardless of storm development or not, we are going to see a copious amount of rain producers, and it's going to be a slow drifting storm along the coast of Texas and Louisiana. So if you live along the coastal regions especially, you need to be on the lookout for this system, as we could be looking at a kind of a surprise event with some intense rainfall depending on the drift and the current track of this particular system as it heads out in the open waters for the next couple of days. But it's a combination of that mesoscale convective system now off the open waters of getting off the panhandle of Florida, along with that cold front. And those two combined should actually develop a little swirl out in the open waters, a low pressure system out here basically just south of, say, Houston, south of Louisiana here as we get into Tuesday, kind of following that cold front, right? It follows that cold front along the boundary. So I think if any rain you might get today in Dallas will be coming to an end to be south of I-20. It's going to be mainly elongated into Austin. I mean, Austin's going to be hitting their 20th day of 100-degree heat just in the month of June today. So yeah, it's been nothing about the heat all in Texas. So any rain they get down here is a welcome sight. And I think that's going to be on the table as we get into Tuesday afternoon along that cold front that's going to be drifting in that area and kind of stall out here into the open waters of the Gulf. There's Wednesday, kind of the same deal, right along that cold front. That's going to be, again, stalling out right here along the coastal regions and bringing actually some much needed rain for a good chunk of the, far extreme South Texas, getting into portions of possibly far south, central Texas, getting into Louisiana, right along the coastal regions, into Mississippi and Alabama, getting into the Florida Panhandle. But for the rest of us, it's fairly kind of high and dry for much, as we get deeper into the middle of next week. But it's all about that little swirl out here getting into the open water. So here's the latest icon model as it kind of really drifts westbound over the coming days. It could be setting up in portions of basically south of, say, the Houston area with this a little bit of instability, trying to get this like little low-level swirl. So be watching this, but I think it's going to be too close to land proximity to get its act together and form into a tropical type feature. But it's a disturbance right now, as well as a storm, is very, very unlikely at this stage of the game. But either way, whether it gets classified as a storm or not, it's going to be a copious amount of rain producers. And right now we'll have to watch this because it's, some of the model guidance is really putting out some intense rainfall with this particular system. The European model actually has it fairly closed and actually drifts it further into land as we get deeper into the middle to late next week. So we'll be watching the guidance, and the latest probability from the European EPS guidance has about a 20 to 30% chance of it forming actually into a tropical storm. So not very high right now. It's going to be very uncertain if it actually does develop a name or not. I don't really think it does. But regardless, it's going to be a pretty big time rain producer along the coastal regions of Louisiana and Texas. as we get deeper into the week. But further to the north, the jet stream lifts further to the north as we get deeper into the Friday, starting into your July timeframe. I think the ridge of high pressure starts to develop and come back. We do have another trough that's going to be entering parts of the Pacific Northwest, where this trough is setting up over the midsection of the country. Could have some more instability coming back for the Dakotas, Minnesota, getting into Wisconsin and portions of Michigan as we get into your Friday time frame with that Celia getting out in the open waters and coming to an end out here into the open waters of the Pacific. That's what's bringing all the, at least, complements of the monsoonal flow for the desert Southwest. We do have another trough that's going to be digging in for the Pacific Northwest, because so that brief warm up will be brief, and you have some cooler weather coming in as we get into next week. But there's the setup by Saturday. We could have some more stronger storms come back into play, but this would be later on next weekend, and that could be over portions of Minnesota, Wisconsin, getting into portions of Michigan as we get into the day on your Saturday. But further south, it's all about the heat coming back for a good chunk of the south and the southeast. So we'll be watching that disturbance out in the open waters, but more or less that cool down that you're going to see for the next couple of days will rapidly change, and you'll be back up well into the upper 90s as we get into next weekend. So there's the setup on the icon model with some preliminary precipitation amounts. It's pretty dry out here in the Pacific Northwest with that ridge of high pressure dominating. There's the monsoonal flow continuing with the heavier rains setting up over New Mexico, getting into following that cold front in the Texas Panhandle and portions of northwestern Oklahoma, getting into Kansas. And there's the standout with that low pressure system out here in the open waters. Right now, most guidance actually puts the most intense rainfalls right offshore, right off into the open waters, but it's not going to take much for this area to put these really intense rainfall, double-digit rainfalls, just right along the coast. So we'll be having to watch this over the coming days and really kind of fine-tune this. Here's the latest Weather Prediction Center outlook as well, putting those heavier rain amounts a little bit further inland, right off the coast, depending on the exact track of this slow-moving, low-steering current system as we get deeper into next week. So hey, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.